once he took the stand. I mean, do you think it would have been better to just stick with his story and deny that it was his voice altogether?
Well, first of all, I don't think there was any possible way he could deny it was his voice. Witness after witness had said 100% that's him. You could tell it was him. But I'm glad we started with the examination of Alec Murdaugh, because for me, that's the centerpiece of this case. You can talk about GPS and all the data. You can talk about SLED's investigation. You can talk about one shooter, two shooters. You can talk about all that stuff. But the defendant took the stand from a day and a half. He sat 6 feet, 10 feet away from those jurors. He looked them in the eye and he said he didn't do it, and they did not believe him. And that, first and foremost, is why we have a jury, to determine credibility of the witnesses. And when a defendant dripping in lies like Alec Murdaugh was, admittedly lying over the years to so many people in so many circumstances and lying about the investigation, for him to get on the stand was a daring move, but I think it backfired. That jury did not believe him, and they found him guilty because of it.
Well, like I said, they didn't believe any tears. They just said they saw snot. That was the only thing.
Yes, he was trying for a snot guilty verdict, but he didn't get it.
There you go. All right. And Murdaugh always seemed to blame someone else. Rich, what do you make of all the different stories and reasons the defendant gave? Would have it helped him to stick to just one story?
I think the stories are a big part of why the jury got where it is. Why the jury, by human nature, wants to figure out, well, if he didn't do this, who else did? And the idea of social media vigilantes storming the property, finding Paul at the kennel, killing his mom too. Why did they kill the mom if they were just mad at Paul? Why didn't they kill Alec? How was Alec on the property but didn't encounter these social media 5'2" assassins? None of it made sense. You have to throw it all out. And that clip we just watched, I think we have not given Creighton Waters enough credit for the cross-examination he did. It was a little too long. He spent a little too much time on the financial stuff. But he nailed Murdaugh on that question and answer about that theory not making any sense. And he nailed Murdaugh at the end about the kennel video lie. He had a lot of good moments in that cross-examination, and I think that resonated with the jury.
Well, at the end of the day, he got the job done. The word that I would use here is genuine, Rich. And I think Judge Newman was very genuine talking to Murdaugh. Didn't talk down at him, but, you know, basically stated the truth.
Genuine, and I would add judicial. And there was no doubt going into this sentencing hearing about what the sentence was going to be. The man murdered his wife and one of his sons, and he was going to get the maximum sentence, which is life in jail. As the judge made the point, the prosecution could have pursued the death penalty, but they didn't. So he was going to get the maximum. But I tell you, if Alec Murdaugh was going to say something this morning, for him to look the judge in the eye and again make the preposterous lie that the jury has unanimously rejected, that he didn't do these murders, for that to be the only thing he said, the judge was almost begging him to say something else. When will it end? When will the lies end? I'm surprised, the judge said, that you're not saying something else. And Alec Murdaugh went down again and twice said, I am innocent of these charges. I didn't do it. And listen, the judge then mentioned the opioid addiction. Maybe it turned Alec Murdaugh into another person. I don't actually still know the extent of his opioid use. I find some of what he said about the amount of opioids he took to be almost impossible. But I do know this, opioids are a scourge on this country and continue to be. And this case is an example of that.
Well, I think for all of us who are watching this, I mean, we were thinking this is a man that wanted to take the stand just last week so much, wanted everyone to hear from him. And his last words was that. Everyone thought that there would be a little bit more coming, but it definitely was not convincing at all. Keep in mind that the defense had criticized SLED for their mishandling of this case. So with that being said, Rich, how justified was this press conference for them?
I think it's okay for SLED to come out and take that position. You know, SLED made some mistakes in this investigation, that's clear, but I don't think today is the day to scrutinize that. And I thought, by the way, in the closing argument, in the rebuttal closing argument of the prosecution, they responded to the criticisms of SLED basically by saying Alec Murdaugh has a lot of nerve, having lied about his whereabouts on the night of the murders, having misled the investigators for months and months and months, to have the audacity to criticize law enforcement, which as solicitor he used to work with. I thought the prosecutors handled that brilliantly in closing argument. There may be, you know, some thinking about SLED and the investigation here. That may make sense in due course, but not for today. Today is for this verdict and about the victims.
Well, I have to ask here, Rich, what are the chances that there will be a new trial?
Small. I don't think an appeal will be successful here. Two problems. One, there was a basis to let in all this evidence on these other crimes because it went to the state's theory of motive, and it did tie to that, and they stuck to that theory from the beginning of the trial to the end. So there was justification for letting it in. Secondly, I believe it might be harmless error because really the crux of the conviction here is Alec Murdaugh lying about where he was right before and right after the murder. And having been caught in that lie and the kennel video and having testified and having had the jury not believe him, an appellate court could say, you know what? It's harmless error if there was too much evidence of those crimes. This defendant went down on credibility.
Cell phone data was huge in this trial after all the testimony that we heard. How big was that in the forefront of this trial, you think?
The prominence of a cell phone or cell phones in this trial was amazing. I mean, think about it. We had to hear from Paul's cell phone to get the kennel video. We had to find Maggie's cell phone and tie that to Alec Murdaugh's travels that night. And then we had to get Alec Murdaugh's cell phone and see the steps he took in a sudden flurry of activity. Those cell phones tell you who was there and when, the steps they took, the path they traveled. We think of cell phones as communication devices, but they're really surveillance devices in the modern world. And without the cell phone data that was in evidence in this trial, there wouldn't have been a conviction.
Well, it was certainly a game changer because one of the key pieces of evidence is what you mentioned, Paul Murdaugh getting that kennel video, and of course, it was on the cell phone. Well, I know Rich Schoenstein likes to gloat on this show sometimes, and here I am outright saying that he's right. I mean, at the end of the day, Rich, it wasn't about any of this testimony. The jurors, one of them kept coming out to say he was a liar, he wasn't good enough. It was about Alec Murdaugh, what he said on the stand.
First of all, I never gloat. Let's just get that straight. But yeah, it was about Alec Murdaugh. It was about his credibility. And, you know, it raises a lot of interesting ideas, right? If he hadn't talked to law enforcement at all, it would have been a different trial. If he had not made up things about his travels that night, it would have been a different trial because there was time he was gone where possibly someone else could have committed the murder, but having found out that he lied about where he was before the murder and he lied about the trip after. Don't forget, he said he went to his mom's for 45 minutes. He raced there back and forth at 80 miles an hour and visited for 20. So he lied about before, he lied about after, and that was too much for this jury to take, and they swiftly came to a verdict.
Yes, it was very fast, but he says the evidence was there. We've been talking about this interview all morning, and there you just saw it. Rich, your reaction.
45 minutes. That's really when the decision was made. It wasn't even 2 hours and 50 minutes. That's a jury that didn't have a reasonable doubt, didn't have any doubt. And I just want to highlight the jury for a minute, because in a case like this, I always think about jury service. These people sit there for 6 weeks. They look at some of the most horrendous evidence imaginable. We see a sanitized version on the TV, but they're looking at those crime scene pictures. They're looking right at that evidence, and then they have to make a decision about guilt or innocence. The job those jurors do, and juries across this country do, is amazing. Cannot have the judicial system.
Verdict, guilty. Signed by the foreperson of the jury, 3/2/23.
Definitely a lot of twists and turns during this whole trial, but the past 24 hours was like a movie. How would you gentlemen just sum it all up as how this ended? Rich, I'm going to start with you.
It's a great tragedy what happened. It's a stunning downfall of someone so powerful with so much to live for, and I think the jury got it right. Justice has been done.